Hey Reddit, I'm posting this because I need to get it off my chest. I've read so many stories here about narcissistic parents and dysfunctional families, and I always felt like my situation was unique, or maybe just a bit too dark to share. But I'm finally out, and I realize my experience might resonate with others who've been through similar hell. The relief is immense, but the anger and the exhaustion are still very real. I'm Alex, 19M. My childhood was unusual. For the first 6 years of my life, I essentially lived with my maternal grandparents, Grandpa George, 70M, and Grandma Helen, 70F. My parents, Mark, 40M, and Susan, 40F, were incredibly young when they had me, barely out of high school themselves. They lived in their own world, moving from one low-paying job to another, always finding themselves, as my grandma would say with a sigh. Their idea of parenting me seemed to be occasional weekend visits where they'd treat my grandparents' house like a hotel, drop in, make a lot of noise, give me a cheap toy, and then disappear again. But with my grandparents, it was different. They were my constants. My grandma taught me how to cook basic meals, how to sew a button, how to manage a small garden. My grandpa taught me about fixing things around the house, about responsibility, about the value of a dollar. They tucked me in, read me stories, answered my endless why questions, and made me feel safe, loved, and valued. They fostered what little sense of normalcy and stability I had. They were, in every sense of the word, my parents during those formative years. When I was in first grade, roughly 7 years old, my parents made a grand announcement. They were finally ready for independence. They had saved up, or so they claimed, and they were moving out of my grandparents' home, into their own place. It was a small, rented house on the other side of town. I was excited, naive. I thought this meant I'd finally have my parents, truly. My excitement quickly faded. The new house was cramped, messy, and constantly filled with unspoken tension. There was no warmth, no comforting routine. And then, about a year after we moved, another announcement came: they were expecting another child. My first sibling. This marked the beginning of my downward spiral into chaos. My new baby brother, David, arrived. He was a colicky baby, crying almost constantly, earning him the nickname Screamer in my head. My parents, overwhelmed and clearly unprepared for the reality of a newborn, quickly started delegating. Not just asking for help, but expecting it. At just 7 years old, I was expected to help care for a screaming infant. I was holding him for hours, rocking him, trying to feed him a bottle, changing diapers, often poorly, because I was a child myself. My parents would disappear into their bedroom for naps or important conversations, leaving me alone with a crying baby. It felt less like I was helping out and more like I was the primary caregiver. I was essentially a child raising a child. They quickly started treating me more like an unpaid, live-in babysitter than their son. The line between being a child and being a parent disappeared almost overnight. Over the next 11 years, 5 more siblings joined the household, each adding to the chaos and, by extension, my overwhelming burden. It was like a never-ending cycle of pregnancies and newborns. David, now 12M, my first brother, Screamer. He eventually grew out of the constant crying but developed a talent for incredibly loud, high-pitched outbursts whenever he didn't get his way. I was the one who had to manage his tantrums, often by myself, because my parents were busy. Emma, now 10F, my first sister, whom I privately called Destroyer. From the moment she could crawl, she broke everything she touched. Toys, dishes, sometimes even furniture. I was always the one cleaning up her messes, trying to salvage what I could, often getting blamed for the breakage. Tom, now 8M, Spitter. He went through a phase where he would deliberately spit out food he didn't like, onto the floor, onto his siblings, onto me. Guess who had to clean up the sticky, half-chewed messes? Me. Liam, now 6M, Tornado. This kid could create a disaster zone in seconds. Clothes everywhere, toys strewn across every surface, food crumbs ground into the carpet. He was particularly adept at unraveling toilet paper rolls across the entire bathroom. My job, often multiple times a day, was to rein in the tornado and clean up his path of destruction. Mia, now 4F, Velcro. She was incredibly sweet, but she was a Klingon. She'd follow me everywhere, literally clinging to my leg, demanding my attention constantly. I couldn't go to the bathroom, couldn't get a glass of water, couldn't even just sit down without her demanding I play with her, read to her, or carry her. She was rarely interested in our parents' attention. Sam, newborn, 0M Hurricane. He was born just a few months ago, the latest addition, and from day one, his arrival just amplified the existing chaos to an almost unmanageable level. The exhaustion I felt was bone deep. By the time I entered my teenage years, my parents' expectations had completely shifted from occasional help to full-time, unpaid caregiver. I was cooking almost every meal for my siblings, doing their laundry, helping them with homework, often work I barely understood myself, breaking up fights, changing diapers, bathing them, putting them to bed. While my friends were playing video games, going to the movies, or just hanging out, I was trapped at home, essentially running a full-time daycare. My parents? They were often out. Running errands. Seeing friends. Date night. They'd leave me with a flimsy excuse and a vague instruction, sometimes just a shrug. They rarely seemed to have money for groceries, let alone actual babysitters. So, it was always me. Always. I felt like I was living in a constant state of resentment and frustration, simmering just beneath the surface. My childhood, my teenage years, were simply disappearing, consumed by the overwhelming needs of children who weren't even mine. The resentment finally boiled over when I was 15. It was a Friday night. All my friends were going to a big party at our buddy's house, a rare chance for me to actually feel like a normal teenager. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, talking about it constantly. That evening, as I was getting ready, my mom walked in. "Alex," she said, without even looking up from her phone, "your dad and I are going out. You need to stay home and watch the kids." My blood ran cold. "What? Mom, no. I told you I was going to David's party tonight. I've been talking about it for weeks." She shrugged. "Well, you can't go. We don't have a babysitter, and you know we can't afford one. You're the oldest. It's your responsibility." Her tone was dismissive, as if my plans were utterly irrelevant. Something snapped inside me. "My responsibility?" I yelled, my voice cracking with years of suppressed anger. "I'm 15. I'm not their parent. You can't just cancel my life because you want to go out. I'm tired of raising your kids for you." My dad appeared, his face tight with anger. "Don't you dare raise your voice at your mother, boy. You live under our roof, you follow our rules. And the rule is, you take care of your siblings. We sacrificed to have you, the least you can do is help." "Sacrificed?" I scoffed, tears of rage springing to my eyes. "You pawned me off on Grandma and Grandpa for 6 years, and then dragged me here to be your free nanny. You've sacrificed my childhood, my life." The argument escalated into a full-blown screaming match. It ended with them storming out, and me, defeated, sitting on the couch while David and Emma looked on, wide-eyed, as Liam and Mia started squabbling on the floor. I watched my friends' Snapchats from the party, feeling a profound, crushing loneliness. During this tumultuous time, my cousin, Paul, 25M, became my unlikely confidant and lifeline. Paul was smart, level-headed, and had seen the writing on the wall with my parents for years. He started calling me more often, inviting me out when he knew my parents were gone, which was often. He saw the unhealthy dynamics at play, the casual neglect, the blatant exploitation. He didn't just sympathize, he actively encouraged me to pursue my own life, to stand up for myself. "Alex," he'd say, "you're a good kid. You love your siblings, I know that. But your parents are using you. This isn't normal. You deserve to have your own life. You deserve a future. You're not responsible for their choices." His words were like a beacon in my suffocating reality. He urged me to focus on school, to think about what I wanted. He helped me fill out college applications, quietly, without my parents knowing. He made me realize there was an escape. I powered through my last year of high school, exhausted but with a newfound determination. I worked harder than ever, often studying late into the night after my siblings were finally asleep. I applied for every scholarship I could find, knowing I couldn't rely on my parents for college tuition. Then, just a few months ago, right before my 19th birthday, another bombshell dropped. My mom, casual as you please, announced at dinner that she was pregnant. Again. A 7th child. My blood ran cold. Another one? Another baby for me to raise? Another mouth for me to feed, another life to babysit? The thought of staying a single day longer, trapped in that chaotic, suffocating house, became unbearable. I couldn't do it. I simply couldn't. That night, I called my grandma Helen, my voice trembling, tears streaming down my face. "Grandma," I whispered, "I can't do this anymore. They're having another baby. I need to get out." My grandparents, bless their hearts, didn't hesitate for a second. "You come home, Alex," Grandma Helen said, her voice firm and comforting. "You come home to us. We'll figure it out." Over the next 2 days, with Paul's discreet help, I packed my most essential belongings, my important documents, and anything sentimental. I did it while my parents were out, as usual. My grandparents arrived in their old car. The scene was quick, quiet, almost surreal. I gave my sleeping siblings a silent hug, tears in my eyes, promising myself I'd still be there for them, just not on my parents' terms. I walked out that door, leaving behind 12 years of unpaid servitude. My parents' reaction was exactly what I expected. Not concern for my well-being. Not remorse for how they treated me. But furious, entitled outrage about losing their free labor. My phone blew up. Texts, calls, voicemails, a barrage of self-pitying accusations. "How could you abandon your family? Who's going to help with the kids? You're so selfish. We sacrificed everything for you." They genuinely seemed more concerned about who was going to watch David, Emma, Tom, Liam, Mia, and the newborn, Sam, than about their oldest son leaving their neglectful home. They even called the police, claiming I was missing or abducted. 2 officers showed up at my grandparents' house. I calmly explained the situation, showing them my ID, explaining that I was 19, legally an adult, and had chosen to leave my parents' house due to their neglect and exploitation. The officers were understanding. They confirmed I was an adult capable of making my own choices and that I was free to live where I chose. They left, and I felt another wave of immense relief. But my grandparents weren't done. They had seen enough. They had watched their grandson be turned into an unpaid nanny for over a decade. The very next day, they contacted Child Protective Services, CPS. They provided CPS with a detailed account of my childhood, the years of neglect, the constant burden placed on me, and the conditions in my parents' home. They even had documentation, old photos, and my testimony. The CPS investigation was thorough. They interviewed me, my grandparents, my siblings, privately, and my parents. The findings were damning. There was clear evidence of neglect and inappropriate delegation of parental responsibilities. My parents were mandated to attend intensive parenting classes, and they were ordered to hire professional, licensed childcare for their children, or face more severe consequences. They were completely stripped of their free labor. With the crushing burden of caregiving finally lifted, my life transformed. My grades, which had always suffered due to my constant exhaustion and lack of study time, soared. I had time to actually focus on myself, on my future. I received acceptance letters to several colleges, along with significant scholarship offers. I'm starting college in the fall, studying engineering, a path I never thought possible. My relationship with my parents remains incredibly strained. They occasionally call, still blaming me, still trying to guilt-trip me. They are struggling immensely with the cost and responsibility of actual childcare, and they still don't seem to understand the gravity of what they did. They still see themselves as the victims. But I'm holding firm. I visit my siblings regularly at my grandparents' house, who are now providing a more stable environment for them while my parents are forced to comply with CPS. I'm actively involved in their lives, but as a big brother, not a surrogate parent. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of responsible parenting, of setting boundaries, and the devastating impact of neglect and exploitation on children. My journey from being an unpaid caregiver to reclaiming my life is a testament to resilience, the power of a supportive family, my grandparents and Paul, and the courage to finally say enough. As I move forward, I continue to build a life for myself, a life free from the burdens of my past, a life where I get to choose my own future.